And with head coach Andy Toole, I'm the play-by-play voice of the Robert Morris University Colonials, Chris Shublin. We welcome you here to Buffalo Wild Wings in Monroeville tonight for our show. Coach Toole, another good week of Robert Morris basketball, a couple of goals accomplished, and those goals were victories over a couple of conference teams here this week. We'll break down each one of those games, but congratulations on a fine week of basketball.
Yeah, thank you. It was a successful week for the guys. One road win at St. Francis and one home win against Mount St. Mary's. And we've talked enough about our day-to-day contracts, and I think we're doing a good job of staying with that mantra and kind of taking each game on the schedule as it comes and trying to prepare ourselves as best we can and be successful in those situations.
Now, for the folks listening in for perhaps the first time tonight, and for the folks here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Monroeville, what do you mean when you talk about these day-to-day contracts? What kind of deal is this?
It's just a deal that we talk about with our guys every day about getting their contract renewed. Work like you're trying to get your contract renewed for the next day. Work like tomorrow's not given to you. Work like you are trying to earn your spot each and every day. And I think since we've kind of taken that approach, I think our guys have performed better each day. I think a lot of times when we start to get a little bit ahead of ourselves and think about what's down the road, or getting ready for the Northeast Conference, tournament championship, or the different things that go on during the course of a season, I think you kind of lose focus on each day. And so, we kind of really wanted to kind of rein in our focus, make sure it was much more smaller vision, day to day, practice to practice, weightlifting to weightlifting, or scouting report preparation, whatever it would be. Each individual task we had, do the best at that, and then try and add as many of those days in a row as we could. And then we figured if we could do that, we'd be successful more times than not.
Coach, I've followed you through your head coaching career the past 3 seasons now, and before that 3 seasons as an assistant at Robert Morris, and this is the first time I've heard of this concept, this day-to-day contract. Is this something you just pulled out of the sky, or is this something you're trying to just keep the guys on their toes with?
I think it's something just with our group. I think it was really, one of the things that I think we had coming into the season was, we had a successful year last year. We had a lot of returning pieces. We added some pieces we thought would really be able to help us immediately. And I think everyone started all of a sudden think about expectation and think about, what this season could be. And, I think we started to hear a lot of people on campus or, in our ears about, what a good team we were going to have. And, just talking about being a good team doesn't make you a good team. And so I think as we looked, with a couple ups and downs in our non-conference play, with a couple ups and downs in the beginning of our conference play, I think we really just needed to change the focus of what we were doing on a daily basis. And I think it's really worked. I think our older guys have bought into it. I think it does a couple of things where it kind of eliminates some of that pressure on, expectation by just worrying about each day. And so it's worked very well for us. We've had a couple guys that haven't been renewed at times. But I think it does keep everyone on their toes. And I think it's a great mentality to have. One of the reasons that we kind of came up with it was I was listening to an interview about Kevin Durant last year. And, his coach, Scott Brooks, said, even though he's one of the best players in the world, he comes to the gym every day like the guy who's trying to make the team. And I thought it was, such a simple but profound way to explain a guy who works really hard and maintains his hunger and stays humble at all times. And I think as coaches, we all want our players to have that type of mentality. And so this was kind of a way we could articulate it to them.
Obviously, it has paid off, and I remember when you got into this whole deal and you brought up this concept of day-to-day contracts. Colonials had lost the first 2 conference games of the season, and right now you find yourself in a 3-way tie for first place at this moment in time. But the deal is not settled yet. It's not a done deal.
Absolutely. Like we said Saturday, they don't give championships in the midway point of the season. There's going to be a lot of games left. Our league has been completely unpredictable for the first 8 games, and we have 10 games remaining, and I think it's just going to remain that unpredictable. And so we can't start worrying about what other teams are doing. We can't start worrying about what records are or standings or things like that. The only thing we can control is how we prepare ourselves and how we perform. And so that's the 2 things we're going to focus on from here on out. And then hopefully when all the dust has settled, we'll have ourselves in a good position come Northeast Conference tournament time.
You're listening to the Andy Toole Show. We're talking Robert Morris basketball right up until 8 o'clock tonight here on ESPN 970. We have some questions left over from last week that we're going to get to, Coach. And I'll tell you what, let's get to a couple of them right now because we'll hold off on recapping last week and also talking about the NEC standings.
And can I call my mom out first? Can I call my mom out
yeah,
on the radio?
she was supposed to tweet us.
She's a huge fan of Chris Shovlin, first of all. That's first and foremost. If I don't mention that, I won't be allowed back for the holidays. But she's been talking that she's going to tweet a question to us because she's real big on social media. She's on Instagram so she can see my son and get pictures of him. She's on Twitter so she can follow me, my brother, and my sister. And she's a little nervous to tweet a question. So, I'd like her to get involved here. She's one of, I'm sure, our thousands of listeners that are, glued to the radio every Monday night at 7.
Well, Joan, I'm going to look right into the camera because this is on YouTube as well, and I'm going to tell you, think hard, think long, and come up with a great question for your son, Andy Toole, because, Twitter is wide open for you. Again, it's hashtag #AskToole, AskToole, if you have a question for the head coach of the Robert Morris Colonials.
And I have veto power, so don't make it too embarrassing.
That's true. It could get too personal. All right, Coach Toole, obviously we had some questions tweeted to us last week, but we were so jam-packed with conversation that we didn't get to everybody's questions. So we have one from Larry from Whitehall. It says, Coach Toole, tell us about the highly rated players you've signed during the early period so far this season.
Yeah, and I think I'm allowed to mention them because they've signed national letters of intent. Hopefully Ryan Fleischer, our compliance director, isn't listening if I'm not allowed to. But we've signed 4 players to national letter of intents in the early signing period. 1 from the Washington, D.C. area, 2 from the Philadelphia area, and 1 from North Jersey. And we're excited about all 4 of them. And obviously when you recruit kids and you try and figure out what you need to add to your roster and what you need to make up for with losses, we're losing 2 very valuable pieces of our team in Velton Jones and Russell Johnson. Russell just surpassed the 1,000-point plateau, the 12th player in school history to go over 1,000 points and 500 rebounds. Velton has 499 assists, and when he gets his next assist, he'll be the first player in school history to score 1,500 points and have 500 assists. So 2 guys that have been mainstays for the last 4 years in the Colonial lineup. And so there's big shoes to fill. And we think that with the returning guys and with our newcomers that'll be joining us next year, we think we have a chance to fill those shoes. And Kevon Stewart is the point guard we signed from Hudson Catholic in Jersey City, New Jersey. He's originally from Patterson. Left-handed point guard, excellent playmaker, excellent at getting guys shots, can play at a number of different speeds, and I think really fits our style. Jeremiah Wortham, 6'7", 4-man from Math, Civics, and Science High School in Philadelphia, just became the all-time leading scorer at his high school and was named the MVP of a showcase tournament they played in over this weekend. And Britt Lee, who's also his teammate at Math, Civics, and Science, a 5'11" combo guard, a guy that can really shoot the ball off the catch. He's got great quickness. I think he's going to be a guy who can guard 94 feet. And then Emmanuel Umboigo, who goes to Princeton Day Academy in Washington, D.C. And Emmanuel is a 6'7½", extremely hard-playing, aggressive combination forward who can do some things inside and outside. And again, we look at some of the things when we recruit guys. Will they fit our system of trying to defend and trying to work and those kind of things? And I think, obviously everyone has adjustments, but I think all 4 of those guys are going to have opportunity to compete and really push some of the returners as they get on campus next year.
All right, it's the Andy Toole radio show here on ESPN 970. I'm Chris Shovlin. Coach Toole, you're talking about your recruits, and I distinctly heard an East Coast flavor. And I'll tell you what, the East Coast has been kind to Robert Morris University as far as its players. You talked about guys like Russell Johnson. He is from Chester, Pennsylvania. He won a state championship with the Clippers over there. You mentioned Velton Jones, your point guard, out of Northeast Catholic in Philadelphia. But we've had such a great Philadelphia connection. David Apollon, who's a sophomore on your club from Imhotep Charter. He won a AA championship. That's a team that beat Beaver Falls a couple of seasons ago. And, it seems like every game that we play, David is going up against a former teammate from high school. That's how many guys are spread around the U.S. But even Elijah Thompson, who is not playing this year due to injury, had surgery, and that ended his season and blew out a knee. But he's from Monsignor Bonner High School in Philadelphia. But there's such a great Philadelphia flavor, East Coast flavor. Do you specifically stick with this area because of the talent, or are you just really looking for players and they just happen to be from the coast?
I think it's a combination of things, to be honest with you. I think, one, since our league is so East Coast oriented, we're the furthest west team in our league. There's just a frame of reference about Northeast Conference basketball when you look up and down the I-95 corridor. I think one of the things that's a part of it, too, is I'm obviously from New Jersey. Right. Coach Rice, before me, had ties to New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. Jimmy Martelli, one of the former assistants, a Philadelphia guy. Joe Gallo's a New Jersey guy. Coach Burns is a Boston guy. And so we have guys that have connections up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And, again, it's just something that has kind of developed for us. I think when you recruit some of the guys that we have from some of the areas, I think, the name recognition starts to get out there, and all of a sudden people see Robert Morris on their radar. I remember when we first got to Robert Morris and I was an assistant coach, and we'd call a kid in Youngstown, and he wouldn't be sure who Quinnipiac and Monmouth were. Sure. But we'd call a kid in New York City, and he'd say, hey, Coach, I was at your LIU game last year. Yeah, I know. I saw you guys play. And so I think having those conversations with people just became a little bit easier. We've had some great players from Ohio, Jeremy Chappelle, Jimmy Langhurst.
Saw them last week.
We just saw them. And we just saw them last week. Some Indiana guys, Dallas Green for one.
Absolutely.
I think his dad still calls every year and says, when are you going to recruit more kids from Indiana? Well, he got his wish. We got Carvel and we got Stephen Hawkins. And so, I think a lot of our guys end up being from the East Coast, but we don't discriminate when it comes to region of the country. If you can help us win games and you can be a great part of our program, we want you.
Newark's been kind, too, with Mike McFadden, your starting center, not to mention Lucky Jones, who got banged up this past week, and we'll catch up with him injury-wise. And Lucky played at the national championship team at St. Anthony's High School in Jersey City, New Jersey, for Coach Robert Hurley.
And I think that's one of the things that we look for as well when we do our recruiting is just having some success. Lucky obviously played for a national championship team with Coach Hurley at St. Anthony's. Velton won a Philadelphia Public League championship when he was a sophomore at Simon Gratz, and then a Philadelphia Catholic League championship when he was a senior at Northeast Catholic. Russell played in numerous state championship games, winning state championships. Dave Apollon won back-to-back state championships. Anthony Myers won a Public League championship in Washington. And so I think when you can get some guys from winning programs, I think one of the things that it does is they have an expectation of winning, and if they don't win, it bothers them, and they try and work to figure out how to change it.
We talked just about everybody on your roster with the exception of a couple of guys, and they are from the Washington, D.C., Richmond area. Anthony Myers-Payton, you mentioned, from D.C., and Charis Prep. He, of course, your backup point guard who's been counted on very, very much, and your top three-point shooter, Karan Williams, a 6'2" redshirt junior from Midlothian, Virginia, went to Christ Church School. So, again, you're talking about different regions of the country where Robert Morris has been successful. The Washington, Richmond area has been kind, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's great players, there's great teams, there's great programs in that area. And, the more you can get your name out around really good programs and really strong talent, you have a better chance of getting some of that talent on your team.
Yep. Of course, Keith Armstrong is a guy we haven't talked all that much about this year, but Keith finally got into the lineup. He's battled some injuries and fought himself back into playing shape and got some key minutes against St. Francis the other night up in Loretto.
He did. He played 10 great minutes for us. Mike was out, and Keith really gave us a lift. And I think it's going to be a matter of, he's working his way back into shape. I think situational things and some matchup things will be, where we have to use Keith right now. And then as he gets more comfortable and he gets a little bit more of his conditioning where it needs to be, then we can kind of expand his role. But, you never know when you're going to need everybody. And you got to keep everybody engaged. You got to keep everybody in line with what your program is and how to go out and be successful and help the ball club. And I think, there's been a number of situations even already this year where we've had guys out and other guys have had to step up. Thursday was no different with Keith, and he gave us, like I said, a valuable 10 minutes.
All right, we kind of wound away from the Twitter question, but we're coming back to it right now. And,
full circle.
Speaking of the lineup, and we have come full circle, actually we're getting questions about some of your walk-on players, and you have a couple of them in Shane Swigert and Treadwell Lewis. And Sam on Twitter is asking, how do these guys get more minutes? And, obviously they are walk-ons at the Division I level, and they're there for a reason, and they contribute mightily during practice for the most part. I know you try like crazy to get them into ball games, but let's face it, you've got to try to win those ball games, and the best player is going to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And Treadwell and Shane, I can't express the value they bring to our program. I mean, Shub, you see it when, we go on the road and you're at practice. Just the knowledge that they have. Nobody cares more than those guys do. And I think each and every day they're maximizing their ability being on a Division I basketball team. And there's no shame in that. It's a great, valuable experience that they've been a part of. We've talked to Treadwell at times about, there was a time in his career where he thought maybe he might want to go and find some place where he would play some more minutes, maybe Division III level, maybe Division II level. And he came back to saying that he wanted to continue to be a part of our program, and we were happy to have him back. And I think he realized that, he had kind of created a bond with some of the guys on the team and enjoyed the experience, enjoyed the memories. The more we can get him in, we'd love to get him in. But
sure.
Like you said, we have to make sure that, we're doing everything in our power to win the games. And those guys, they bring so much to the program. I can't even explain.
And in Treadwell's case, there's a memory that no one's ever going to erase, and he was part of the team. He was on that bench when Robert Morris last played the NCAA tournament.
Oh, he certainly was, and I know he'd like to bookend his career with a trip back. And you know, his whole mentality is incredible. His family is terrific. They come and support all the time. And Treadwell would do anything for one of his teammates. He would, you know, stay up and quiz them on scouting report all night. He'd watch film with them. He'd go over plays with them. He would do everything that he's, you know, possibly could do to help our program be successful. And he's a big part of why the program has been successful, because he pushes those guys each and every day in practice. He challenges them, and he makes them better.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Another question from Twitter. We have Shelby on Twitter. Who is Robert Morris University's toughest competition right now, Coach?
St. Francis, New York. I'm going to say that's our next game. You know, every game that we go out, that's our toughest competition. And I think, as we've seen in Northeast Conference play, there's a bunch of different teams that are going to be able to possibly get on a streak and be able to win a 3-game tournament. You know, whether it's Robert Morris, whether it's Bryant, whether it's Long Island University, whether it's Wagner, whether it's St. Francis, whether it's Central Connecticut, Sacred Heart. You know, you look at all these teams that are tied for first, 1 game out, or, you know, a game and a half out. There's a lot of teams that, based on, you know, a good weekend or a poor weekend, the standings can really change drastically. And so everybody is our stiffest competition, but our next game on the schedule is St. Francis, and so that's who I got to say.
That's going to be a tough one. Give me a short preview, if you can, of what the Terriers bring. I know that's, you know, Terriers, they'll dog you up if they get a chance, and the pun is intended.
Yeah, they really will, and they have done a great job this year, especially in league play, of taking away people's ability to make 3-point shots. They're leading the league in conference play in 3-point field goal percentage defense. They have a great 1-2 punch in the post of Akeem Johnson and Jalen Cannon. Jalen Cannon's a sophomore, averaging almost a double-double, was on the all-rookie team last year in the NEC. And then they just have a great Coach Breaker does an excellent job of getting the guys to play together, really buying into their roles. They have a number of guys that can hurt you on any night. They have good balance in terms of some shooting, some wing players, and some point guards that can break you down and get into the paint. So it's going to be a tall test for us. And then the atmosphere that we're going to play in, as you know, going to St. Francis, they get a great crowd. It's a great atmosphere. It's a packed house, and it's going to be a very intense game. And I think that you know, our guys are looking forward to it.
And it's a tight court. I don't think you know, too many people in Pittsburgh might realize what type of basketball arenas the Northeast Conference schools in the city have. But that St. Francis building, I mean, literally, the university is in one building on Remsen Street in Brooklyn Heights. You walk into that building, the whole campus is in a high-rise building. The gym is on the main floor. When you walk in there, you just feel like you're being smothered.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think it'd be probably the equivalent if we played home games in John Jay. You know, it's bigger than John Jay, but it has that feeling of everyone's on top of you. You have trouble even communicating across the floor because of the way that the gym echoes. You know, the walls are in tight, and you just feel like you're in a fight as soon as you get in the building. And we know that their team has been great in that building. They really compete there, and it'll be a tall test for the Colonials.
Long Island, on the other hand, has built a relatively new building, and that's the team you're going to play on Saturday. And I'd be remiss if I didn't plug the fact that that ball game is going to be televised live across the country on ESPNU. So we invite our listeners who typically tune into the radio side of Robert Morris to keep the sound up, the television picture up, and you'll get to see and hear the bird's eye view of Colonial basketball. But all that said, another opportunity for Robert Morris to showcase its talent and showcase the program.
Yeah, I think those are some of the things that come along with the success that we've had. You know, being selected to play a game on ESPNU. Obviously, it's a rematch of the last 2 years of the championship game. And so that'll be, you know, that pretty much explains what type of game that will be. But obviously, we have to take care of business Thursday night. But it is nice. It helps recruiting. It helps the notoriety in the league. It helps the university. When people turn on their television and they see Robert Morris University for 2 hours worth of an infomercial.
And you hope to give them a pretty good show. Of
Absolutely.
course, that's what it's all about, is to get that win so we can sign that day-to-day contract for another day. Andy Toole is the head coach of the Robert Morris University Colonials, and we are live on ESPN 970 here. And welcome back to Buffalo Wild Wings here on Business 22, Wilkins Township, Monroeville. Chris Shublin, the play-by-play voice of the Robert Morris University Colonials, with the head coach, Andy Toole, and we're here until 8 o'clock and taking your questions via Twitter. Before we recap last week, Coach Toole, again, we have some questions from some of our Twitter followers. This is from Michael on Twitter. Can you explain the offense that you run? It looks like a flex offense to Michael, but it's different from what he knows. I mean, do you want to give away some secrets tonight?
Yeah, I'll bare bone it a little bit here. It's definitely not a flex offense. It's kind of a paired screening offense. We have a number of sets and entries that we run into it, and then it's a motion offense where we usually have a big and a guard on each side, where they're continuously screening for each other, trying to gain an advantage, and then we reverse the ball through some dribble penetration and some things like that. So not a flex offense, but more of a traditional motion with consistent and constant screening going on, trying to give somebody advantage, and then trying to occupy the defense on the weak side.
Now, I've been to practice enough to know that sometimes it works perfectly, and sometimes you're not real happy with the down screening and then the kickouts. And what gets you frustrated about the way you guys run it sometimes?
You know, I just think one of the things that you have to do in order to run good motion offense is you have to be committed to moving. And if you're going to stand still, I don't care what offensive style or system you have, it's just not going to be as effective. You really have to be able to move the defense in order for them to break down. And one of the ways that you move them most effectively is through changing sides of the floor and ball reversal. If you can get good ball reversal and now make the defense go from, help side defense to ball side defense, and then vice versa, going back and forth, there's a good chance at some point you're going to get those guys to break down. That's when you have to attack and take your advantage. And then within those attacking moments, we want to get our guys to certain areas of the floor where we know a driver is going to have options to either kick or drop off to a big guy. And, like I said, when we move and when we're active and playing unselfishly, like most offenses, it works pretty well. And when we're stagnant and maybe staying on the dribble a little bit too long, we're not as effective in it.
What are the roots of that offense? Where did it come from? How did you develop it?
You know what? It's something that when Coach Rice and I got to Robert Morris, Coach Rice had been an assistant at Marquette for Mike Dean, and Wisconsin under Dick Bennett had a mover blocker offense. And so one of the things we felt when we looked at our roster was that we didn't necessarily have guys of true positions. We had tweeners. We had Tony Lee, who was a 6-foot junkyard dog.
Oh, man, was
he? Guard who was almost better with his back to the basket. And we had A.J. Jackson, who was a 6'6" starting center on the defensive end, but was more of a spot-up shooter, was one of his strengths. And so we felt we had a bunch of interchangeable pieces. We had guys that could play multiple positions, and so we didn't want to bog guys down with certain positioning, and so we really started to kind of brainstorm and toil on how we thought we could get them in situations where they would be at an advantage. And this is kind of what has come about, and it's been very good to us. It's been something that I think gives our guys a plan, gives them a little bit of consistency when we fly down the floor and might not have a quick available shot right away. And our older guys obviously are better at it than our younger guys.
Sure.
But that's goes with the territory. But that's really the origins of it.
Coach Andy Toole here on ESPN 970 and the Andy Toole radio show for Robert Morris basketball. Coach, you addressed a question earlier from one of our Twitter followers about recruiting. Now, speaking of your offense, are you out there looking for specific athletes who fit into your current offense to try to keep it the same, or are you looking for something different altogether?
Well, I think there's times where you're looking for guys that fit into your system, but each year you got to kind of toil a little bit with where you're getting success from, where you think you might have advantages, and even from game to game. There's certain things within our offense where, depending on opponent, depending on the way they defend, depending on their strengths and weaknesses, we'll maybe try and highlight a certain area of our offense. And obviously you want to have guys that can make plays and make shots. I think that's one of the biggest things in college basketball, especially with the shot clock. You need guys that can create an advantage for your team. You need guys that can either find an advantage for themselves or make a play for their teammate. And that's one of the things we really look for during recruiting. From a backcourt standpoint, I love guards that can shoot the ball off the bounce, a la Carvel Anderson. He's really great at mixing it up, whether it's shooting the three or now getting guys on their heels and being able to raise up right off the bounce is something that we work on a lot. But obviously, if you can bring that skill with you, it's a bonus because it's something that's very, very difficult to guard.
A step away from offense to talk about the defense. It is almost singularly a man-to-man defense, and it's talk about junkyard dogs in your grill. Don't let your man go. Don't get beat. And that's the type of defense you play. You will go 2-3 when you find the necessity, but for the most part, I'm sure you're looking for guys at the high school level and at the JUCO level and at the prep level who are going to come in and just get right up nose to nose with the offender.
And again, it's something where we look for guys that can guard multiple positions, because you're going to be on the floor a lot, and there's going to be times where even as a post player, you might have to hedge a ball screen and move your feet. I look at guys' feet very, very much, because the game's played with your feet. If you have slow feet, if you have lazy feet, I think it's hard to be really successful at the Division I level. Some of the exact technique that we work on and stuff, you can be taught, but we look for that hunger to guard the ball, the ability to compete. We look for guys who get upset when they get scored on. Things like that we can really take and mold into a great defensive unit. And so those are things that we've had success with some of the guys that we've brought in. Lucky Jones, Dave Apollon, Carvel Anderson obviously has done that, and some of the older guys when they first got here. Stephen Hawkins is growing into that now and has really done a nice job in the last few weeks of working extra with our coaches. He was out there when I got on the court today, working on his ball screen defense, working on his post defense, and those are the kind of things that you hope you get when you're bringing a recruit in, that he's going to really work at some of the intangibles and some of that technique stuff that can really be the difference between getting a stop or getting scored on.
I've noticed oftentimes the bench will, the guys on the bench, the coaching staff, they'll jump up when somebody hits a go-ahead shot for two, or somebody hits a big three. Everybody comes off the bench. If somebody takes a charge, it looks like the bench exploded.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we try and do with that is those are plays that should get more recognition than they do. Unfortunately, they're not on SportsCenter. The top 10 isn't made up of, guys diving on the ball, guys taking charges, guys helping in the gap, guys
closing out. That's what the coaches want.
All those exciting things that, help me sleep at night. I don't even know how many dunks we've had this year. I don't think it's been very many. But those are the things that get rewarded. And so those are what guys, they look for. And unfortunately, within our program, we've tried to make it cool to take charges. We want it to be cool to be the first team on the ground. We'll stop the film and say, okay, they had 3 guys on the ground. We only had 2. No wonder we didn't get that loose ball. And so when those plays occur in the game, and a lot of times they're the difference between winning and losing. When our guys make the right play and they make the right choice, we want to make sure that it's respected and it's noticed by everybody on that bench.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Andy Toole is the head coach of the Robert Morris University Colonials. This is the Andy Toole Show, and we're live at Buffalo Wild Wings in Monroeville, Wilkins Township to be precise, Business Route 22, right along the strip. And we're here until 8 o'clock tonight. And again, a little bit later in our show, Katie Phillips, who is the head women's lacrosse coach at Robert Morris, is going to be joining us in our Buffalo Wild Wings guest segment. Coach Toole is all ready to go. I know you did some homework on women's lacrosse.
Always.
So, he's always prepared. We know this for a fact. So, Katie, I hope you're ready for him. We're going to come up in a little while.
And if you have any questions for Katie, feel free to tweet those too, because I'm sure she has some people out there in the Twitter sphere that would love to get some questions answered.
Absolutely, and she brought some of her people here tonight too, so it's great to see women's lacrosse represented well. Coach, if we can, let's step back a couple of nights and go back to Thursday night, St. Francis of Loretto up on top of the Allegheny Mountains. Robert Morris facing a St. Francis club that is improved, although their record doesn't show it. They've fallen to 1-17 now. They're 1-6 in the Northeast Conference, but this is a better St. Francis club. Obviously, they're on the rise. 2 of their key players did not play in that game against Robert Morris, but still, Colonials posted up a lot of points. 84-70 was the final score in that game. And you had 4 guys in double figures, including Carvel Anderson, who hit for 22 points. If you will, let's go back and talk a little bit about the flow, the ebb and flow of that game, if you will.
Yeah, it was I thought we got off to a great start, which is something that we talk about all the time, of making sure that we start the game properly, especially when you're on the road, and especially when you're playing a team like St. Francis. They've had some struggles this year. They're playing an entire youth movement. They're playing all freshmen and sophomores. They had 2 of their guys that were out, and we talked to our guys about making sure that we didn't allow them to remain confident and stay in the game. And so we wanted to get out to a good start. We wanted to make sure that we tried to jump on them as quickly as we could and see if there was any way that there could be a little bit of discouragement on their part. To Coach Krimmel's credit, their new coach, Rob Krimmel, and his team, they didn't quit at all during the course of the game. But, we were able to build a nice lead in the first half. I thought our defense and our details in the first half were excellent, and they resulted in us, putting on a very impressive offensive show led by Carvel Anderson, who had 19 points in 7 minutes. And I think it was a situation where we had great screening going on. We were really moving the ball well, and guys were, like I talked about earlier, they were continuing to move themselves and move the ball. And, started the second half with that same type of energy. And then unfortunately, and this is where I get nitpicky as a coach, didn't probably end the game with as much detail as I would have liked. Our urgency kind of dropped a little bit. St. Francis made a little bit of a late run to get back into the game somewhat. And that's something that we talked about on Friday, just making sure that we're trying to finish games out. Just because you build a lead doesn't mean you're going to keep the lead. And a lot of teams in our league are well coached. They're not going to just roll over. And, St. Francis was case in point. They cut it to about 10 points there with 2 minutes to go in the game. And now all of a sudden, you never know. Things can get interesting at that point in time. And, it's just another learning experience for our guys about how to maintain that level of excellence maybe for an entire 40 minutes.
Yeah, you had a 22-point lead with 17-18 to go. It was an 18-point halftime lead. You were up 47-31. End up winning it by 14. But you're right, it did get a little close, and I'm sure it made you a little bit nervous. Perhaps the same thing with the Mount St. Mary's game. Robert Morris comes out and has an 11-point halftime lead, 33-22 over the Mountaineers. You end up winning the game 76-68, but there was a time there where it was down to a couple of possessions.
Yeah, you think? And again, Ant Myers, I'm going to get on him a little bit about it. We saved the ball with 1:13 to go in the game. We're up 11, and he goes in and tries to shoot a driving layup, which was not necessary. They run down, make 3, and then get a steal and make another 3, and all of a sudden it's a 6-point game with 45 seconds left. And those are some of the ups and downs of going into conference play. Those are some of the things that you're constantly working on and teaching when you do situations in practice or when you're watching film like we did today and talking about time and score situations. And you want to have as many guys as knowledgeable as you can be when it comes to time and score. But again, I thought another great start from us. I thought we defended excellently in the first half. And I'd say even the first 10 minutes of the second half, I thought we defended very, very well. And then once again, just a little bit letting our guard down, a few rebounds, a few communication plays, a few deep breaths from our defense allowed them to get some buckets, and now all of a sudden it maybe got a little more interesting than it should have been.
I have a feeling that you'll agree with this. If you could put Focus in a bottle or a can and sell it to other coaches in the NCAA, you'd be the richest coach in the country.
Richest coach, I might be the richest person in the country if I could sell it to coaches, if I could sell it to, small business owners, executives, managers all over the world. Focus is something that should be in a greater supply than it is.
Carvel Anderson, another 22 points against Mount St. Mary's, so he scored 44 over 2 games, 22 apiece. And there are other Colonials who are really starting to come into their own. Russell Johnson struggled earlier on in the year, and Russell has come on. And you mentioned earlier in the program tonight that Russell is now the 19th all-time member of the Robert Morris 1,000-point club. He surpassed that plateau at St. Francis and added to it with 14 more points against Mount St. Mary's the other night. But Russell's starting to really play, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about the clock ticking on some of the seniors, guys running out of eligibility who aren't going to be back next year, and this is going to be the end of their collegiate career. They may not play organized basketball again.
And I think it's no coincidence that we've started to play better since Russell started to play better. We've known the influence that he has on our team and his ability to really be a mismatch issue in certain games in our league. His versatility, he's one of our best rebounders. He's one of our most knowledgeable players. He's one of our most experienced players. And so all those things combined make him so valuable for us. I was looking at our stats today, and I think one of the things that's amazing is we have 6 guys that average over 9 points. And I think that's the kind of team that is hard to defend. I think it's the kind of team that coaches love having that kind of balance where each and every night it could be somebody different. It makes the defense or your opponents now have to game plan for multiple guys. And I think it allows openings at all different positions. You can't all of a sudden take all your attention and put it on Carvel Anderson or put it on Velton Jones or put it on Mike McFadden, with Russell and Lucky and Karan Williams and Anthony Myers and those kind of guys.
2 minutes.
I think it's a nice blend that we have going right now offensively, and I hope we can continue to stay in this rhythm.
You're starting to attract some attention not only around town but around the Northeast and around the country in the NCAA. You won 6 consecutive ball games. You moved into a 3-way tie for first place in the Northeast Conference. And I know you're going to say the deal's not done yet. This is the midway point, but still, that is admirable considering the 0-2 conference start this year.
Yeah, obviously you'd rather be tied for first place than tied for 12th place. And so, you're happy about that right now, but, you want to make sure that you understand what the destination is. You want to make sure you know what the end game is. And so being tied 8 games in doesn't do a whole lot for us. We still have a long, long way to go. There's going to be a lot of important possessions, important halves, and important game played. And so we got to make sure that, like I said, each and every day we're taking care of our business.
All right, Coach Katie Phillips is coming up next. We're going to take a break coming up in just a little bit. But one more Twitter question that we got in, and this one must have come from the Jersey Shore. That's the only thing I can think of. What are, in order, your 3 favorite Bruce Springsteen records? Now, keep in mind, Andy Toole grew up on the Jersey Shore. He is a Bruce Springsteen aficionado. So number 1, 2, and 3 as far as records are concerned from the boss.
This could be the hardest question I've gotten since I've had the radio show. What is this, our 4th week now? I'm going to have to go number 1, Darkness on the Edge of Town is my favorite all time. I'm going to go number 2, Born to Run, number 2. And number 3, I'm going to go The Rising. Those are my top 3 all time Springsteen albums. And then everything else is tied for 4. I could go E Street Radio all day long in my car, followed in my office with iTunes, just shuffling through the boss. So he's my guy, and we'd love to have him on the show if you can get in touch with him.
Oh, boy, I wish I had that kind of connection. Maybe we'll get a hold of Joe Krashecki. They're buddies, and Joe's a Pittsburgh guy, so
absolutely.
You never know. They jam together down on the south side from time to time.
I was at the show this year when Joe, he kind of booted the lyrics to Glory Days, but I thought that he'd know that one by heart, but boss had to help him out through it.
That's all right. That's why we're all here, helping each other. Andy Toole, the head coach of the Robert Morris University Colonials, and this is the Andy Toole Radio Show. We're going to come back in just a couple of minutes here, and we're going to talk about women's lacrosse with head coach Katie Phillips. That'll be our next segment here on the Andy Toole Coaches Show on ESPN 970.
Now, more of the Andy Toole Show, live from Buffalo Wild Wings in Monroeville on 970 ESPN.
Back. Where the Wings are fantastic, I need to add. And in our Buffalo Wild Wings guest segment tonight, we have head coach Katie Phillips of the Robert Morris University women's lacrosse team. Now, I know when you mention lacrosse inside the Sewell Center at a Robert Morris University basketball game, everybody's intensity goes up because these are some of your biggest fans, Coach.
Absolutely. The men's and the women's team have really, really supported our guys. They're right there in front of the Colonial Crazy section. The men's team tends to paint their body from time to time or come in costume, which is always appreciated. But both programs have really been supportive of men's basketball. And I know that, Katie has coordinated with us a few times where she'd bring her recruits into some games and, have a nice atmosphere for them to witness as they're, trying to make that tough decision about where they're going to go and play their college lacrosse.
All right, super. Coach Phillips, let's get caught up with your club. Where are you right now, and how are things shaping up?
Well, we're just about 2.5 weeks into our preseason for the spring championship season coming up here. So we're getting into making sure that our fitness is where it needs to be, starting to review what we did in the fall, and more importantly, start thinking about what we're going to put in new for coming up here as we go into our out-of-conference schedule and then, of course, into our NEC conference schedule.
Of course, Andy Toole's going to have some questions for you. The first thing that comes to my mind is, how do you deal with the weather right now?
Well, we are very lucky at Robert Morris. With the Island Sports Center bubble, we have got an indoor turf facility for when that weather outside is just too much for us to be outside. We get to be in there. It's a great teaching environment, and we have the opportunity to get on Joe Walton Stadium turf when we've got weather like we're going to have in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think on her favorites on her phone is definitely the Weather Channel. It's the first thing she's monitoring on a daily basis. But, Katie, one of the things I wanted to ask you was obviously the program is only 9 years old now. This is its 9th year. And you and Joe Walton have a similar distinction, being the only head coaches in program history of their respective sports. But talk about starting the program. Talk about, getting hired, figuring out how to create your roster, how you're going to kind of orchestrate all these things to the point where now in 2011 you were in your, first Northeast Conference tournament, Coach of the Year in 2011, and just how far the program's come in that such short amount of time.
Well, I think number one coming in, Pittsburgh is not known as a lacrosse hotbed as it currently stands. So the one thing that I had to do coming in to start a program is really reach out into some of the more traditional areas and see where I could draw students And most importantly, I had to put Robert Morris's name on the map in terms of the lacrosse community in general. So starting the program, coming in as a first year, going right into Division I without a club season, we really had our work cut out for us, but we put a core group of 15 girls on the field that started the culture of this program, and most importantly, we've continued to improve and progress through each year, and we've really seen some of our best years in the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you always know that you wanted to coach? And the reason I ask is because, you know, I know you played lax at New Hampshire, and as I was doing my research for the show tonight, I didn't realize that you had a Bachelor of Science Marine and Freshwater Biology. What was the intent with that major?
Well, I think I went in, first of all, it's most important for everybody to know that I'm actually terrified of water, all forms of water.
Which makes it an even more logical selection for a
Exactly.
major. Go ahead.
I somehow thought that I was going to be the next Jacques Cousteau, and when I came out and found out that that was not necessarily a job opportunity that was going to present itself, I went into education and most importantly followed my passion into lacrosse and got some great opportunities early on, and then the job opened up at Robert Morris and it seemed like a great fit.
Always nice to have that lacrosse to fall back on in case the freshwater community doesn't welcome you with open arms, huh?
True, true.
Fantastic stuff, and it truly is. Again, let's talk about the upcoming season, who your toughest competition is going to be, and maybe some of your star players on your club.
I think right now, out of conference, as with all the sports at Robert Morris, our biggest crosstown rival is Duquesne. We've had some really close games coming up in the last few years, and I think that this year we're going to give them a really good run for their money. It's always a fun game, lots of atmosphere and intensity around it. So I think out of conference, that's a huge one for us. And in conference, again, you know, we're going after kind of the top four. For us, that's Monmouth, Quinnipiac, Mount St. Mary's, and occasionally Sacred Heart. With a 10-team conference, we really, anybody can take themselves into that postseason four. So right now, I think the most exciting thing about this season is we've got talent in every class. We didn't lose a whole lot coming out of last year. Most importantly, we are going to have kids in every grade that are going to contribute to what we're going to get done this season. We've got some spectacular freshmen. Jessica Karwacki and Corey Karwacki are two twins. Jessica is just a master at the draw. She's going to keep getting us those possessions that we need offensively. We've got Tara Southworth coming back as a senior defensively. Rachel Cox is a junior who's going to really head up some of our experience in that defensive unit. I think we've got a ton of speed all over the field, and with Caitlin Pence returning in the cage, I think we've got a really good shot of a early conference success and getting into our conference having some real confidence going in.
One of the things that I don't understand about women's lacrosse is shooting space. Talk to me about shooting space. I think it's one of the most illogical rules in sports that you can't defend in between the person who has the ball and the goal. Like, you wouldn't want to stop them from trying to shoot it at the goal. You actually have to get out of their way or it's a penalty, correct?
Right.
Can you please explain that to me a little bit?
It defies, I guess, logical thought. However, shooting space is, the key to shooting space is within a stick's length. Without wearing any equipment other than goggles, we become open to a lot of,
targets.
I guess what you
targets.
could say,
Yeah,
moving
targets.
targets as we go through there. So it's all about approach to the player who's attacking the goal, making sure that we're keeping players out of the direct path of the ball, and most importantly, keeping our game safe, which is right now in our community is the number one thing we're trying to do.
Nice. And now my most important question of the night. Some people listening tonight might not know that Katie and I were actually roommates.
Hey, wait a minute.
Her, myself, and Jimmy Martelli. We lived in the South Side together.
Oh, that's right. I remember
Jimmy
when
Martelli,
you first got here.
Former Robert Morris assistant, current Rutgers assistant. And I'd like to know, Katie was coming for a few months. And the summer, I think it was, she ended up being the last person standing in that apartment. I moved out with Brooke, Jimmy moved to New Jersey, and Katie had the apartment to herself. With all that in mind, I'd like to know who was the better roommate, myself or Jimmy, reminding you that this is not the Jimmy Martelli show.
True, true.
Who was the better roommate?
It's a toss-up. I would say probably my favorite roommate is probably Brooke.
Clearly, she's my favorite roommate
right.
too, and no offense.
Let's be honest, but it's a tough one. Jimmy was extremely, extremely clean. Andy was a lot more fun to hang out with.
Oh, okay.
So I think seeing as I'm your guest right now, you were my favorite.
And I guess, I mean, it all depends on how you want to categorize a good roommate. If you want someone who's neat or you want someone who's fun to hang out with. I'd go with the latter. You got to make the choice on the former.
You know, you can really look into that answer and see a couple of different directions there. But, Katie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Obviously, the place had a great view of Couple Stadium on the south side, too.
There's no doubt about it. Ran a couple laps on that field.
There you go. There you go. Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck this season.
Thank you for having me.
Katie Phillips, the head women's lacrosse coach at Robert Morris University, joining us here live at Buffalo Wild Wings in our Buffalo Wild Wings guest segment here at the Monroeville location tonight. Well, Coach Toole, we're running a little bit short on time. We've got about 3 minutes to get people set up for this weekend. Let's swing back into basketball talk right now. And obviously, St. Francis of New York in Brooklyn Heights on Thursday night. That's a 7 o'clock tip. Long Island on Saturday at 3 o'clock. That'll be live on ESPNU all across the country. Let's talk about the Terriers again first, if you will. Get us set up for that game on Thursday night.
Yeah, they're going to be a terrific opponent. You know, they're extremely difficult to play on their home court. We already talked a little bit about their unique advantage with their home facility, but they just provide a lot of challenges to your defense because they have great balance, whether it's their interior as well as shooters, as well as guys that can penetrate and really break your defense down. And so we're going to have to be extremely solid in our formula, extremely solid in all of our defensive principles and our defensive communication. And then from a offensive standpoint, they're a very aggressive man-to-man team. They'll mix it up with some zone, but they do a nice job of really just disrupting your timing, you know, changing your cuts, making it difficult for you to come off screens. And as we talked about earlier, good offense a lot of times is predicated on ball reversal and changing sides of the floor, and they try and make it very difficult for you to do that. And so it's going to be a battle of who can kind of impose their will. We know both teams are going to compete at a high level and are going to be very, very well prepared. It's going to be who can kind of control the tempo and the pace of the game.
And I know we're all on day-to-day contracts, but I have to jump ahead and look at the Long Island game, even though St. Francis is the next big opponent. Long Island, it's going to be a rematch of the last couple of Northeast Conference championship games. 2 years ago, you lost in overtime. Last year, you lost to them on their floor.
Yeah, it's going to be, you know, probably a very great, you know, crowd, intensity, energy, like every time we go play LIU at their building. And it's going to be something where, again, tempo is going to be a big part of that game, as it's always been. You know, making sure they usually want to get up and down a little bit more than we do. Us trying to make it a half-court game, them trying to make it a full-court game. But the meaning of Saturday's game probably won't mean as much unless we, you know, do what we need to do on Thursday and have a great performance Thursday night.
All right, again, Coach Toole, good luck to you this coming week. It's going to be a tough trip to Brooklyn. It always is, and let's hope the Colonials can keep the winning ways going. 6 wins in a row. Let's see if it can push to 8 by Saturday.
Absolutely.
All right, Andy
15.
Toole, the head coach of the Robert Morris University Colonials here on the Andy Toole Show on ESPN 970. Again, we want to thank Coach Katie Phillips for joining us here tonight. And thank the folks here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Monroeville. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next Monday night from Gibsonia right here on ESPN 970.
Thanks for listening.